Welcome to the World Youth Olympiad. We are witnessing Qiyu Zhou take on the formidable Nodirbek Abdusattorov. We are underway with e4, a classic central grab that immediately opens lines for the light-squared bishop and prepares to stake a claim in the center of the board. Black responds with e5, mirroring the central tension and establishing a solid foothold right out of the gate. White plays knight to f3, developing a piece while immediately attacking that central pawn on e5. Black defends with knight to c6, bringing a piece out and protecting the e5 pawn. White chooses the Ruy Lopez with bishop to b5, putting immediate pressure on the knight. Black plays knight to f6, ignoring the threat to the knight and challenging the center immediately. White plays d3, a solid, quiet move that supports the e4 pawn and opens the c1 diagonal. Black develops with bishop to c5, placing that piece on an active square and eyeing the f2 point. White plays c3, preparing to support a future d4 push and limiting the scope of the black bishop. Black castles kingside, tucking the king away to safety and bringing the rook into the game. White follows suit and castles kingside, ensuring king safety before the middle game complications begin. Black pushes to d6, opening the diagonal for the bishop on c8. White plays bishop to g5, pinning the knight and creating immediate tension. Black responds with h6, forcing the bishop to declare its intentions immediately. White retreats the bishop to h4, maintaining the pin on that knight. Black plays bishop to g4, aggressively challenging the pin. This is a sharp, double-edged decision that invites White to create complications in the center. White develops the knight to d2, shoring up the center and preparing development. Black pushes g5, aggressively kicking the bishop away from the h4 square. White drops the bishop back to g3, safely tucking it away from danger. Black jumps the knight to h5, eyeing that bishop on g3 with intent. White captures the knight on c6. This is a critical trade that simplifies the position and forces Black to make a structural decision with their pawns. Black recaptures with the pawn on c6. This opens the b-file for the rook, but it also leaves the c6 pawn as a potential target. White brings the queen to a4, immediately attacking the c6 pawn. Black plays bishop to d7, calmly defending the pawn and unpinning the position. White strikes at the center with pawn to d4, challenging the heart of the board immediately. Black retreats the bishop to b6. This is a bit passive, and the engine would have preferred to trade pawns on d4 to simplify the tension, but here we are. White snaps up the pawn on e5. This is a sharp, aggressive choice that forces Black to react to the central imbalance and keeps the initiative firmly in White's hands. Black pushes the pawn to g4, a bold, aggressive lunge on the kingside. White shifts the knight to h4, eyeing up the f5 and g6 squares. Black captures the pawn on e5. This trade clears the center, but it also opens up lines that White can use to generate activity, keeping the position slightly in White's favor. White hops the knight to c4, eyeing up those juicy central squares. Black brings the queen to g5, looking for some activity on the kingside. White brings the rook to d1, lining up behind the central pawn. Black slides the rook to d8, mirroring the action on the d-file. White moves the rook to d2. This is a defensive adjustment, but it's a bit slow. The engine really wanted to see the knight jump into f5 to create real chaos. Black plants the knight on f4, creating immediate, stinging threats against the white position. White tucks the king to h1, clearing the g-file for later. Black brings the bishop to e6, eyeing the center with renewed purpose. White strikes! Rook takes on d8 with a check, forcing Black to respond immediately. This is a sharp exchange that simplifies the board while keeping the tension high. Black recaptures with the rook on d8, bringing the piece to a central, active square. The position is balanced, but the game is heating up fast. White snaps off the bishop on b6. This is a critical trade, removing a strong defender and opening up lines for the white queen to jump into the action. Black takes back with the c-pawn, reinforcing the center and preparing to challenge White's control. It is a solid, structural choice that keeps the game tight. White grabs the pawn on a7. The The queen is now deep in enemy territory, creating real headaches for black and forcing them to defend their back rank. Black slides the bishop to c4, creating a nuisance for white's pieces. White retreats the rook to a1, looking to stabilize the queen side. Black jumps the knight to e2, creating a fork threat against the king. White plays queen to a4. But this is a massive mistake. The engine screams that taking the knight on b6 was the only way to stay in the game. By ignoring the threat, white allows black to seize total control. Remember, always calculate the immediate tactical threats before making a move that looks active but ignores the danger. Black slams the queen down to d2, putting white in a world of hurt. White lashes out with bishop takes on e5. This is a desperate attempt to create chaos, but it is a massive tactical blunder that drops over 3 pawns of advantage. Instead of this aggressive capture, white really needed to play h3 to stabilize the position. By ignoring the defensive needs, white lets the advantage slip away entirely, leaving the position completely lost. Black calmly responds with pawn to b5. This is the engine's top choice, hitting the queen on a4 and forcing it to move again. Black is tightening the screws, and white has no good answers left. What a tough finish for white in this high-stakes battle.